Hello everyone, again my name is Matt Alford. I'm a consultant at IBIS Inc. and today we're going to be talking about configuring quality management.
So to get started, we want to define, we're going to look at our agenda, and today we want to define some key terms related to quality management in Dynamics AX 2012. We will look at prerequisites for quality orders, some different quality order statuses, and we will also take a look at quarantine and inventory blocking. So to start off, we will talk about what a quality order is in AX. A quality order defines a set of one or more tests that must be performed on an item. And obviously the results can be either qualitative or quantitative. What that means is if you are inspecting an item and you're looking at, for example, the color to see if the color is at an acceptable quality level, it would be a qualitative result, meaning that the test is either going to simply pass or fail. A quantitative result or quantitative test is when we're looking for an actual number or a result or a measurement. So if you're actually measuring the length or the weight of an item and it's either inside or outside of a specific tolerance, that would be a quantitative result. What is a quality association in AX? This defines a set of tests, the acceptable quality level or AQL, and a sampling plan that applies to the quality orders. Again, the sampling plan would be a specific percentage or specific number of items you want to inspect. So if you wanted to inspect 10% of a specific item and you received 1,000 pieces, then you would naturally inspect 100 pieces. Non-conformance is any item that does not comply with standards, with your quality standards. When there is a non-conformance in AX, you are able to document that non-conformance and look at the documentation at a later date. You can also print the documentation of a non-conformance. In quarantine, any item that needs to be quarantined because it is has not been inspected or it has not passed your quality standards, those items are set into a quarantine warehouse in AX, which is separate from your default warehouse in AX. This inventory cannot be allocated or reserved to sales orders or cannot be shipped to customers. Now we're going to look at prerequisites for quality orders. I'm going to actually go through this list of prerequisites and then I'm going to actually demonstrate them on the screen. So first we'll actually go through the list. In AX, in order to create quality orders, you first need to define your inventory parameters. You need to define units of measure, and you'll need to define basic information for tests such as test instruments, the tests themselves, test variables, test groups, and item sampling. You'll also need to assign tests to a test group, define quality groups, which is an optional step, but if you have multiple types of items or multiple item numbers that require the exact same types of tests, you can assign them to a group and then create quality tests that refer to that group instead of having to create a reference, an individual reference for every item. You can simply do it for one quality group. We'll also define the quality associations or guidelines, and this is what AX is going to use to determine when a quality order needs to be created automatically and what types of guidelines it will follow through that quality process. So now I'm actually going to take you into AX and we will look at how to set up those prerequisites. The first prerequisite on the list was inventory parameters, defining your inventory parameters. So in order to do this, you will navigate to the Inventory and Warehouse Management menu, and under Setup you have the Inventory and Warehouse Management parameters. From here you will click on the Quality Management link and you will see a checkbox for quality management. If this is unchecked, then quality management will not be available to you. So once it's checked, you can use all the functionality of the quality management system. You can also click here on Report Setup and create quality reports that you will need to create later in the process, such as the certificate of analysis. When you're creating a report, in this restriction section, you're able to define whether it's an internal or external report. You can if you have certificates of analysis, for example, that can be either internal or external, you would need to create two different reports. One that is restricted internally and another certificate of analysis that's restricted externally. Once this is done, you would check your number sequences by clicking on the number sequences link and verify that number sequences have been set up for your quality management, such as quarantine numbers, quality orders, non-conformance numbers, and certificates of analysis. Once this is done, you'll navigate to Organization Administration. Under Setup, you will go to Units and then Units again. And this is where you actually set up your units of measure. You'll see in the Contosa database that I have installed here, there are a lot of units of measure already set up. But for example, if you were to look at inches, you have a unit classification that needs to be determined, whether or not this is a length, an area, a liquid volume, or so on. You would also select under the system of units whether it's United States customary units or metric. You would also need to determine your decimal precision. So this is rounding up how many numbers after the decimal are allowed. For example, if you were measuring something in days, your decimal precision would be 0, because you would want to keep obviously that to whole numbers. For something like inches, you obviously could have numbers after the decimal. So here we've selected a precision of 2. Once your unit of measure has been set up, you can go to Unit Conversions, and here's where you determine a calculation that allows you to convert the unit you've created to other related units of measure. So here you see calculations to convert inches to centimeters and to feet. Once your units of measure are set up, we'll navigate to Inventory and Warehouse Management. And under Setup and then Quality Control, we have several different forms that we're going to need to look at. We'll start off by going into Test Instruments. So if you needed to create an instrument that you use for a quality test, this is where you'd set it up. So for example, we have measuring tape here. You can define a test area. So if there's a specific area of your building or your site where this test instrument resides, you could designate that here. Once you have completed this, you then go to the tests themselves, and here you can actually create the test and give it a description. And you are also able, if you create a new test, you're able to select the test instrument that you've just created that will be used for this test. And for example, if I select the weighing machine, since the weighing machine was set up with kilograms as a unit of measure, you notice that that unit of measure automatically populates here. Next, we'll look at test variables. Here we simply are setting up what type of variable you're going to be measuring during this test. So the specific test that we're going to be looking at today is the dimensions of a stereo box. So in this specific test, we'll need to actually measure those dimensions. Once you set up your variable, you can click on outcomes here and define what types of outcomes you can report. You can report in the test itself once you've completed the test. So in this specific example, we can report our results as being accepted or an acceptable measurement, or if the stereo box is too big or too small. And you'll notice the outcome status that's referenced. If the measurement is accepted, then the test passes. If the measurement is too big or too small, then the test fails. Next, we will look at item sampling. In item sampling, you're going to define what quantity of items are required for the test. So for this test that I've just highlighted, you'll notice that it is under the quantity specifications field. It's set up as a fixed quantity. So in this specific example, we're going to select one piece for the test. You see the value is 1. If I select the 1% item sampling, you'll notice the quantity specification has been set up as a percent and the value to 1. One other thing to be aware of on this screen is what's called full blocking. If full blocking is unchecked, when you create a quality order, only the quantity that is being inspected is blocked or prevented from any other transactions. So for example, if I've received a shipment of stereo boxes and I am going to inspect 1%, and I've received 100 boxes, so I'm going to only inspect 1 unit. If full blocking is unchecked, then only the 1 unit is reserved or blocked from any kind of inventory transaction. So the other 99 units could be shipped and invoiced, but this 1 unit would not be able to. If you check the full blocking section, now the entire, you see the description here at the bottom of the box, the entire order line quantity has now been blocked. So in the example I just gave you where we received 100 stereo boxes, if full blocking has been checked, then the entire 100 pieces has been blocked from any type of inventory transactions until the inspection has been completed. So once this is completed, once item sampling is completed, we're then going to move to test groups. Once you set up a test group, you are asked to enter the acceptable quality level. So in this specific test group, 100% quality is expected in order for the inspection to pass. Anything less than 100% would fail the exam. You'll also notice at the bottom of the screen you're able to set up the individual tests that relate to this group of tests, this enclosure group. So the enclosure group has been set up because we're actually measuring the inside dimensions of the stereo box. So you could theoretically create multiple sequences or multiple tests that are included within this test group. If you were to create multiple tests, then the user would be expected to comply with test 10 or the first sequence, and then if there was a second sequence, number 20, once the first test was completed, you would be expected to complete the second test before the overall test has been completed and before an item can actually be released from blocking. If you scroll to the right, you'll see a section for documents. So if you have specific specifications that you want to attach to this test, you can do it here. You can attach specifications for the test itself, any type of SOP or procedure document that will explain how the test is to be conducted, or any documentation on the equipment that's being used. Anything along those lines you can attach here. Also, if you were to click on the Test tab, you can select a test instrument here. Sometimes this test instrument, depending on how you set up the other parameters, may or may not be populated here. So if the test instrument wasn't already assigned in a previous step, you can select a test instrument here. The default outcome is also defined here. So in this specific example, the default outcome is accepted, which is a pass status. So now we're going to go back to the PowerPoint for a minute. We're going to look now at quality order statuses. Created status will only occur if the quality order has been created manually. Started status, if any quality order has been created automatically, it'll automatically be in started status. If you've created a quality order manually, you have to actually click the start button to move it into started status. Then you have a report as finished status. In this status, the item's been released from quarantine, but the inventory has not been moved back from the quarantine warehouse back into the default warehouse. But once you have ended the quality order and it is in ended status, then the inventory has been moved back to the default warehouse. If we go back into AX for 1 minute, we'll take a quick look at quality groups. In quality groups, you are able to set up a group that you will use to collect multiple items into, so that you can assign this group to a specific test instead of having to create a test for every individual item. Once a quality group has been created, you can go into item quality groups and actually create a reference. So here we have 8 different items that have been entered into this table, and all of them are now related to the enclosure quality group. So all I would have to do is click New here, select the item number that I want to use, and then select the quality group. And then if I go to quality associations, this is where all of the different parameters come together to create an automated test sequence. So once quality associations have been created, depending on the criteria you set up, this criteria will be referenced if a automated quality order is triggered. So in this specific example, when we created this quality association, the first thing you have to do is select a reference type. In this specific example, we selected purchase. So if we select the purchase reference type, we're referencing the purchase order procurement cycle. So once you've selected the purchase reference type, we're able to determine at what point during that purchase cycle do we want to trigger a quality order. For example, when we receive a product. If you were to select the sales reference type, you could trigger a quality order when a packing slip has been registered. So before we have actually shipped an item, we can inspect it. We can also do the same when a production order or a route has been closed. If we look at inventory, if we were to select the inventory reference type, this is one example that's manual only. If you select the inventory reference type, it's going to block all inventory in a specific site or warehouse in lieu of a quality inspection. So in this specific example, we're going to select the purchase reference type. Once you select your reference type, you would then determine whether or not you wanted all items in your database to require this quality test. If you want to select a group of items, so if we were to select a group of items, we could actually select this enclosure group that we set up a moment ago. Or if we wanted to, we could select table, and we can select one specific item record, 001 in this example, one specific record from the item table. The account code would then reference back to the reference type. So in this example, the account code would reference a vendor because we're in the purchase reference type. So if I wanted to select a specific vendor, if we were having specific quality issues with one vendor and I wanted to only inspect item 001 when it is shipped by that specific vendor, I could go to the vendor table and select that vendor. Or again, I could select a vendor group, or I could select all. In this example, I want to select all because regardless of what vendor has produced item 0001, we want to inspect it every time it arrives at our building. Under the quality order generation section, this is where you will determine when, at what point in the process, the quality order has been triggered. So in this example, we want the quality order to be triggered once we've received the product. And the execution field is whether or not you want the trigger to happen before or after the product receipt. So we want it to happen after. This checkbox, the quarantine upon validation failure, if it is checked, then the inventory that you're inspecting will be moved to quarantine upon failure of your test. We discussed briefly what quarantine was a moment ago, but I do want to mention that quarantine can happen either manually or as a part of an automated process. We're actually going to look at both today. If it's automated, on the screen you'll see a couple of examples of it at what point during the process the automation will happen. So now we're going to jump back into AX. We're actually going to demonstrate quality order, and we will look at what happens throughout the process, and we'll also demonstrate the quarantine orders once we've completed that. So I've set up a few purchase orders that we can look at as examples, but before I do that, I want to create a manual quality order. So we're still in the inventory and warehouse management module. Under the periodic section, we go down to quality management and then select quality orders. And again, we're going to create a manual quality order here. So we'd simply click on the new button, determine what type of quality order we're creating. Again, we're going to create a purchase quality order because we're referencing an item that's been received, which is part of the purchase cycle. We will select our vendor, which in this example is Earth Television. Which is vendor account 1001. Reference number will ask for the specific purchase order that we're referencing. In this example, we're going to reference purchase order 4119. And then the reference lot that we're referring to. So if there are multiple items on this purchase order, this specific purchase order only has one line, but if there are multiple lines, you would see them all listed here on the screen. And you'll select the item that you're going to inspect. In this specific example, we're inspecting item 2001. And you would select your test group and the quantity that you want to inspect. So because we had previously set up this test as a percentage of the overall receipt, It automatically defaulted in a quantity to inspect of 2 units. We simply click OK, and now this quality order has been created. Once the test has been concluded, you would come to the bottom of the screen and click on Results and actually enter in the results of your quality test. So in this specific example, we're going to assume that everything passed inspection. So the result quantity are the 2 units that we inspected. In the outcome, we could select any of the outcomes that we created earlier in this process. So we're going to select Accepted, and then we're going to validate. And you'll notice once we validated that under the test result we have the green check mark, which is a good thing. So once the all tests have been completed, in this specific example there's only one sequence that needs to be completed. Once that's done and the entire testing process is completed, we'd go back to the top of the screen and validate. Who it's validated by, and if you had a failure, which we'll actually demonstrate later in this webinar, but if you had a failure here, you could select to accept the error. So if you wanted all of your inventory to not be quarantined despite the error, you could select this here. Or if you wanted all of your inventory to go into quarantine, you would select the quarantine upon validation failure box here. But luckily with this test everything passed, so we don't need to worry about either. We'll simply click OK. And now the test is in a pass status. So that is manually creating a quality order. Now we're going to look at how a quality order will be created automatically. So now we're going to actually go into a purchase order that I created that references an item that we set up earlier in one of our quality associations. I had previously set up this purchase order with item 0001, if you recall, under the quality association that we looked at earlier. So for this specific item, regardless of the vendor, whenever it is received, a quality order should be created automatically. So we're going to receive this purchase order. And now we notice that quality order 8185 has been generated. So we will show that quality order. It takes us back to the same screen as we were on before, but only the one quality order is displayed here. And you'll notice it already has our test listed at the bottom because we had all this set up previously. And we'll go in again and reference the results of the test. You notice at the top of the screen first, the quantity of 3 was determined automatically based on the criteria that we set up previously. So we're going to report the results of our test here at the bottom of the screen. And in this specific example, one of the items that we inspected failed. So we will note that here. One item failed because it was too large. So we will select that outcome. And then we will click New so that we can report the 2 items that were accepted, that passed. And now we will validate. And you'll notice that the item that failed has a red X under the test results, and the 2 items that passed have the green check mark. But overall, because in order to successfully complete this test, 100% of the inventory was supposed to pass the inspection, and since that did not happen, the overall test result displays a red X because this inspection failed. So now we're going to validate the overall test. In this specific example, we're going to quarantine the inventory that failed inspection. Now that that's happened, we will create a non-conformance. So it already lists the item number that we're referencing. We're able to select a problem type. In this specific example, the problem was wrong dimensions. The defective quantity defaults to the quantity of items that we inspected, but in this specific example, only one item was defective. And then we simply click OK. Now we'll notice, if we go back to the purchase order, that the quality order has been closed. It's listed here. Once I refresh the screen, you'll notice that the quality order has been closed for that purchase order. And then if we navigate back to the Inventory and Warehouse Management module, scroll down to Quarantine Orders. Now we see an order for the item that we want to send to quarantine. This is created to let workers in the warehouse know that they need to now move this inventory into a quarantine area. And you'll notice in this specific example, all 300 units are going to quarantine because we had determined earlier that upon failure, the entire quantity of the order line was going to be moved, not just the units that failed the inspection. So once these items have actually been moved into quarantine, you can report it as finished. And then you can end the quarantine order. And now if we were to close out of here and do an on-hand inquiry for item number 1, we'll select the site and warehouse dimensions. You will notice the 300 units have been moved. And if we look at transactions for this item, here are the 300 units that have actually moved out of this warehouse. Last topic we will discuss today is inventory blocking. Inventory blocking can be manual or automated as part of the quality inspection process. Basically what inventory blocking is, if we want to block or freeze inventory from any type of transactions, you can do that here, pending some type of a review. If you don't want to create a quality order, you simply need to temporarily block your inventory. You can do that. In order to do that, you will navigate under, we're still in the Inventory and Warehouse Management module. Under Periodic, you simply click on Inventory Blocking. You select New, enter the item number that you want to block. In this specific example, perhaps an item in inventory, or let's say an entire pallet of inventory got wet because of a leak in the roof. Let's say there's 200 units that are not damaged, but we need to set them aside so that they can dry until they're available for shipping. You select the site and warehouse where this is going to be done. And click Close. And if you were to look at that inventory, if you were to go to the on-hand inventory, you'll notice now that 200 units have been reserved. Once the inventory is dried out and is now available to be shipped again, in order to remove the block on that inventory, you simply highlight the item that you have blocked and delete. It's that simple. And now, if you go back to your on-hand inventory for item 0001, you'll notice that the 200 units are no longer reserved. So that concludes our webinar on quality orders and quality management in AX 2012. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email the address on the screen, and we'll be happy to get back to you with an answer as quickly as possible. Again, my name is Matt Alford. Thank you very much.